Hey everyone, Kevin Rose here. Welcome to another edition of the Proof. I have no idea what to call this. The Roundtable, the Brain Trust, the... I don't know, guys. We need a better name. I've been struggling with this one.
We're going to come up with a better one here in the next couple of weeks. I'm
for sure.
Convinced.
So I'm joined with Derek Edwards, of course, and G Money. It is good to see you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be back on.
And if people are listening to the audio version, highly recommend you switch over to the video version of this because G Money is wearing CryptoPunk Ape, which is via a Snapchat filter. It is awesome. It actually moves as you talk. The mouth moves, the eyes move. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely makes me look much more photogenic.
It's great. It's
not true.
One thing, G Money, we haven't caught up in a minute. I know we've both been so busy with all these different things over the last few months. And, we used to chat like at least every few weeks. And then the chaos hit on both sides of the house.
Sure.
Can you bring us up to speed? I mean, I personally just want to know, like, what's the latest? I know you had a big launch. Like, what have you been up to?
Yeah. So, we're still, we did the launch about a month ago now. It was 3 weeks ago. I want to thank you because I know really early on in the process, like back in, I think it was January, like early this year, I was really kind of just like asking you a bunch of questions of what your experience was like with Proof because I wanted to know the idea for like the right community size and, how I wanted to go about it. And you definitely provide me a lot of great advice that I definitely hope I listened to and, definitely has helped me with the framework of Admit One. And kind of, building my own community membership for all things like that I'm going to be doing going forward. And, whatever it is with partnerships or things that I want to do, which I'm not ready to release just yet, but things that I have been planning for a really long time at this point. So yeah, Admit One is basically a 1,000 member community where people that had collected my POAPs over the last year were put on the allow list to mint the Admit One, and it was free to mint. And the community has been great. I have nothing but great things to say about the experience so far.
That's awesome. And so this is all live now. Your whole Discord and everything that you have on the community side is live, and then obviously people can pick up one of these on OpenSea as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, the community's live. We actually. We did kind of like a roundtable talk for the Fed announcement because myself and a couple people that are partners on the team also have like trading background experience, and this is stuff that like we lived and breathed every day for so long that it's like, okay, well, obviously everybody's watching to see what the Fed decision is, and we were kind of just going back and forth with our opinions, what we thought and what it means for like Web3 and NFTs going forward. It was really cool. Like I didn't expect that many people to show up because it was kind of impromptu. And I think we had close to, around 100 people, which is about 10% of the membership, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been like, I'm sure you get incredible engagement too, which I'm sure you've probably been floored by, right? At least, especially initially with regards to how interactive and active the community has been.
Yeah, it's cool to work with a community that's engaged like that. We've been trying to figure out what is the best platform to host stuff on, because there's just a whole slew of different ones. And we actually landed, believe it or not, on using the webinar functionality on Zoom. So it's like, webinar sounds like such a 2000 term, like it's like so old school, but that's where we're at, and it's nice. We do Q&As and all that type of thing. So we always think about like how can we at least once a week get in front of the community.
Right. Yeah. No, that's something that we've been talking about internally and thinking about. Is just one of those things that I didn't realize launching the community was how engaged and how active the community would be, and then being like trying to figure out ways to help empower the community that wants to be there and like being an active role, right? Which I didn't expect, especially so early on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Derek, what have you been up to, man?
Same old stuff. Had a great conversation in Flamingo this morning, actually on some of the topics that G just described. Talking about the market, talking about equities, talking about the role of crypto and Web3 and this paradigm shifting technology at a time when it feels like things are kind of melting down elsewhere. And it kind of surfaced like, what does that mean for NFTs and what's going on with the NFT market in the short to medium term? It's a very fun conversation to work through. It's kind of top of mind for me over the last couple of days. I know, G, you've been thinking a lot about it, and it sounds like you had your community kind of riffing through ideas this morning. I would be curious just to like kind of pick your brain and hear how you're thinking about it, given your background and both like, 1 foot in the, as a trader and someone who's thought very deeply about the markets, and your other foot as someone who's spearheading an amazing NFT project right now. I think you have kind of a unique lens on how these worlds are colliding and the interesting, pieces of surface area across both. So yeah, I mean, maybe you can walk us through your early thinking on market stuff, and we can kind of tease out what that might mean for NFTs more broadly.
Yeah, cool. No, I think it's super interesting. And I think over the last, 3-4 days, I've had a lot of conversations about this, and I've been thinking a lot about it since Friday evening, Saturday morning. Because there's like kind of like 3 things at play here. There's the macro, right? There's the macro of like the overall market, right? Like risk assets in general. There's the macro in crypto, and then there's the macro in NFTs. So I'll start with like the macro general. And, coming into this week, I remember I looked Friday evening, Friday I was on calls all during the day. And then I'm like, I'm super curious as to how the market ended up closing. ETH got below 1,700 and was starting to hold below 1,700, which was the low from the previous few weeks. And so I was like, all right, let's see how the S&P closed. And I noticed that the S&P closed at the lows of the day off a very hot CPI number. And I think it might have been Barclays or it was another bank that came in and upped their Fed rate hike expectations from 50 bips to 75 bips. And, I start thinking about that. And then, I think the Wall Street Journal Fed mouthpiece kind of said the same. And then over the weekend, people were talking about that as well. So I started thinking about that overall and being like, all right, Bitcoin have had these massive pullbacks from the highs. We're talking like 70% plus drawdowns. And there's obviously all this forced selling within the space. But you take a look at the S&P 500, we're only 20% off the highs, right? Like, we're still like, we're not at max pain yet. And like, we're still, if you compare the lows in COVID to where we are now, we're still like significantly off those COVID lows into what's probably a weakening economy. So like, as I'm sitting there and like thinking about the conundrum that the Fed is in, and you take a look at like over the last 15 years, for Fed monetary policy, they generally want risk assets to go higher, right? They want low unemployment and high risk assets. And so we're now stuck, the Fed is now stuck in a place where inflation is high, right? If they, we all know that the economy is slowing and like the world is starting to grind to a halt. But like, if the Fed cuts rates, then inflation goes higher, right? And like, that's almost one of those things where they're in this predicament where they need the market to go lower in order for them to cut rates. And so like, crypto being a, highly speculative risk asset, what does that mean, right? Is like, if the market goes lower, you have to assume that, Bitcoin is a beta play and ETH is a beta play on those risk assets, that they probably might have some more downside as well. So like, to me, it's like a very interesting spot that the Fed is currently in, where if they, and I think this is why, like, it started getting leaked that they have to come in with a 75 basis point hike instead of 50, and even maybe 100 was on the table, right? And like, they have to come in and also jawbone and say, oh, this isn't the end of rate hikes, because if it's the end of rate hikes, then that means Fed easing is coming pretty soon, and then risk assets start ripping, and inflation is a huge problem. So like, I'm thinking about that from like the macro level of the Fed like really wants to curtail demand, right? Like, you still have oil hanging out at around $120 a barrel. Inflation is still persisting, and they need that demand destruction to happen in order to then justify cutting rates at some point in the future. So there's that, right? There's that macro overlay. And then when I think about it in like the crypto macro of, part of the Luna fallout from last month is now, you have the Celsius rumors that started circulating on Friday and Saturday, which then turned into the 3 Arrows capital rumors that started circulating on Sunday and Monday. And, all the forced selling and liquidation that's happening and going on in the space where it seems like it could be a short-term low at the very least. But like, I feel like we haven't seen that capitulation yet, but like, it's like starting to set up where, right? Like everybody, you don't know this reminds me so much of like 2008 more than 2007, where, you don't know who's solvent. You don't know like who's got what exposure to who. And like, what does this mean for like other counterparties of this and that? And like, there's that component, but then also if, 3 Arrows is the biggest borrower on crypto desks, what does that mean for credit going forward? Right. Like, if you're a lender that, has exposure to 3 Arrows, then like, what does that mean going forward if you take a loss on that and like the credit that you will then extend to other trading desks and other trading partners? So that's like the macro in, crypto, right? And so you have these two things where like, I feel like crypto is almost at like max pain because we've had so much of a drawdown, but then like risk assets in general are still relatively close to highs where, there had like, of course, there's been a ton of pain in the tech center and in startup vals. But like the fact that the S&P 500 is still so close to the highs, like is a little concerning when you're sitting there being like, okay, like, start easing, to kind of help equity or valuations in general. So those are like the two macro sectors that I've been like thinking about a lot over the last few days. And, then try to think about how that applies to NFTs, which I'm sure you guys have also been thinking about those things as well as the NFT market a ton over the last week. And I know that from just our conversations in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, that well said. So let's take this just like a step further into the NFT bucket, and just like it would be fun to kind of go around the horn and talk about it. Let's say we the bottom of like wherever these markets land, that takes a little bit of time to form. So like let's just say like we still haven't seen max pain, to your point, G. Let's say that markets aren't quite ready for a next leg up. And let's say like we enter this period of time where like there's this persistent, ranging that happens at the levels we're at in the greater, equity and greater macro crypto space. What happens to NFTs? Like, I guess the enthusiasm for NFTs. And I guess like the wrinkle I would throw in there is like, can we draw conclusions in terms of, how the NFT market may respond, just given that it's such a different animal? Like I'll take, there's a number of collections that we can talk about, but I look across the space right now at some of the Grail collections like Fidenza or Chromie Squiggles or, Ringers. And these floors are holding pretty solid, denominated in ETH. Like sure, the dollar price has dropped just by virtue of ETH going down. But I would say like in general, these are, when they move, they're moving at still relatively flat, at flat prices, like compared to where they were moving a week ago or 2 weeks ago, or even a month and a half ago. Or I look at Admit One, for example, which has been a beautiful drop over the last month. I mean, the floor is close to 10 ETH here. You've got 888 owners, 1,000 of these Admit One cards. It feels like you've got an ossified community here. And so as I think about these hyper scarce assets in the NFT land, and I think about all of the stuff that's happening in the markets and with the Fed and with crypto broadly, in terms of like the greater crypto space, I'm looking at NFTs and wondering and scratching my head, like what does this all actually mean? So yeah, curious to kind of go around the horn and hear from folks what they think what could happen over the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and whether there's enough information yet for us to glean in terms of what could possibly play out.
It's definitely, I'm a big fan of not trying to predict the markets, and especially given the thing that scares me is like we don't know when the kind of last shoe will drop. Like we don't know how many other players are going to come to the table and become insolvent, and there could be it's
Contagion
Celsius
risk.
yesterday. Yeah, exactly. There could be a lot of other players that are hiding it right now. Whereas, if ETH drops a bit more, all of a sudden it kind of, pushes them out into the public eye, and we see a lot more uncertainty around big centralized overextended organizations going under, right? So that's one thing. I just don't even want to pay attention to that. Maybe it's me putting my head in the sand a little bit, but it's like that's past my pay grade. Like, I'm not gonna do anything. Gee, that's more your space in terms of like predicting what the Fed's gonna do. For me on the NFT side, though, it's a lot of projects have been hammered, but some of the ones that I look at and I selfishly want them to dip, like Chromie Squiggles, have stayed flat, and I'm just
not going anywhere.
I'm like, come on, sell off, people. Like,
I'm looking too. It's sticking around to that 6 ETH price point.
Yeah, and I get it that ETH, half or what it was or less, and so in some sense, I want to go take some stable coin and just convert it over to ETH, and then just go in on some of these projects that I consider to be, either ones that I really truly love. I'm passionate about the communities, or there are blue chip projects that, I think will stand the test of time no matter what happens. So that said, there's something to be said about dollar cost averaging your way into this market, right? Like NFT cost averaging your way in, you want 10 squiggles or 3, buy one today and then buy one in 2 weeks and then buy the next one 2 weeks later. Like I would hate to try and predict anything and try and time it and miss it,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think NFTs are interesting, right? Because they're very illiquid, right? And so when you think about, if I needed liquidity, like my NFTs are probably the last thing I would sell, right? Because I would be selling cash, I would be selling equity, I would be selling, fungible tokens before I sell those NFTs. And I think that there is enough demand of people with pockets out there that understand, right? And I know, Derek, like we've had this conversation a few times now where it's like, these are very, very scarce assets, right? So it's, at the end of the day, 10,000 squiggles is not that many squiggles considering that there's 8 billion people on planet Earth, and so these things is like, I think people understand that. I think it has been interesting. I've been like, kind of surprised at how well a lot of floors have really held up into this downturn. It's just more that there have been transactions, right? It's just people kind of just holding, waiting and seeing, because you can get liquidity, but it's, at a significant discount to maybe the last trade. So people are like, okay, like I'll just wait and hold on to it. So to me, it's almost like, it's just, I think that liquidity drying up has been kind of maybe the signs of just people not willing to transact at a certain price and say, oh, I'd rather hold it because and I think we were talking about this morning on the Flamingo call, where it's like, what is the value? What is the opportunity cost of exiting like a community and then maybe not being able to ever get back in, or having to pay a significantly higher price? So I had no idea what's going to happen. I just think it's a really interesting dynamic that we're seeing set up here.
Yeah. Something that would be interesting to link out to the audience, Kevin. There's this great thread by an anonymous tweeter. His name's Arad, and he wrote this thread yesterday called "The NFT Market is a Fat Man," and he made the argument that that because the NFT market is so illiquid, that what ends up happening is there's slow movements in response to like the greater macro movements, but when they do move, they move with convexity. And then every movement kind of accentuates its own momentum. The parallel he drew, which was an interesting one, was what happened in 2008, like with the macro markets kind of selling off, max fear, people were in pain. And he looked at the art market, the contemporary art market at the time, and it took, I think, about a year or so for the art market to respond in the same way. It was a little bit slower on the uptake. And the argument he was making was like the contemporary art market was like, much more illiquid. And so to G's point, like these things just weren't trading, but when they finally started trading again, they were trading at a discount. But the volumes really fell off of a cliff. I would say the really interesting thing about that is the way I think it was a great thread. We should definitely link it out. And he brought up some really interesting points. I would say like the two things that come up for me when looking at a thread like this, the first is NFTs are certainly illiquid compared to like ERC20s, or like being able to walk up to Uniswap or an AMM and being able to like find best price and best execution and immediately in seconds. These things are, they look more like order books, right? So like you list on OpenSea, you find a seller. And so like there is, like they're not as, the markets aren't as robust or as liquid as something like an ERC20 or a publicly traded stock. With that said, they're not as illiquid as like the contemporary art of 2009.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to wait for a Sotheby's or Christie's auction to come around to
you don't.
Something. Yeah.
Which is a pretty interesting dynamic that we've never really seen before. And then the other thing I'll note is when I looked at the volume as it related to like the bounce back after 2009, 2010, it only took 2 more years for the contemporary art market volume to start moving up again and starting to reach all-time highs. And so I think my takeaway when I looked at these charts was, like it's still TBD to like figure out if we can comp some of like that illiquidity that we saw in 2008 and 2009 to these current markets, because I think digital assets and digital objects like NFTs are so different. But then also the second point is, there could be like amazing deals to be had, in dollar terms, if you believe that these things are hyper scarce, that there is a Schelling point around certain collections, or that certain works of art or certain projects or certain collections or certain teams are going to come out, like roaring out of the depths of this market. And so it's an interesting conversation. I'm very stoked to be having it with you two, but yeah, I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hear what they're saying in that the time it's less liquid. So in theory, it takes longer for there to be churn in the marketplace, and we wouldn't hit what you're saying is our lows on the NFT side would be lagging from that of crypto, right?
Yes, I think that's the argument.
But in the same sense, that really wasn't the case when we saw the bull market run, right? Like that was exponential kind of craziness that was happening. So
yeah, it's interesting. I think we're in uncharted territory here, Kev. Like I don't think we have enough data at this point to know exactly how these markets may actually correlate with one another. Between like the NFT space, the crypto space, public equities, kind of how all of these pieces fit in the puzzle. It's more asking questions at this point, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the super subjective thing on my end is if ETH is doing well and I feel like my bags are padded a bit with extra ETH, like it's way easier for me to pull the trigger on some degen NFT, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, even I don't know what the climate's been like in your Discord, but even when, it looked like we bottomed and like risk assets started going higher, like, you could tell like the mood in the Discord just really changed, right? And people, whereas like, I think chatter had kind of grinded to a halt over the last couple of days as people, are probably checking prices, trying to see, again, that contagion risk of like, you don't know what's next. You don't know if there's going to be another shoe or if this is the final shoe. But I agree with you. I think as people feel comfortable about their bags, they're like, okay, well, I feel comfortable now. It's not as good as it was, a month ago, 2 months ago, but okay, I'm willing to take a chance on this degen play, right? Like let's mint this and buy it and see what happens, right?
Yeah. Question for you two that is just, it's somewhat related, but it's just like a fun little fantasy question just to throw out there to break things up a bit. Let's just say you have, 100 ETH right now to spend. Derek, I know you've asked this question to some other people in the past that we've talked to. It was like an interview question for some of our analysts that we were looking at Proof. Where do you go now? Where do you go today? Let's just say you actually forget about selling. You want to enter the market. You think things are on sale. What are you buying?
G, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be giving you probably a really vanilla answer. I'd buy Squiggles, I'd buy Punks, I would buy Cyber Brokers, and I'd buy Artifact Clothes, right? Like those are probably the 4 on the board that I have on my list. Like if I could get an X copy, if I could get a Fidenza for sure, right? Like I'd put those on the list, but I highly doubt I'd be able to get them at a reasonable price.
So let's talk about the couple that we've covered Swiggles, Punks, Fidenzas, all that stuff makes sense. the artifact clones. And what was the other one that you mentioned?
Cyber Brokers.
Yeah, Cyber
Josie
Brokers. So
Bellini's project.
yeah, I know both those projects, but dig in a little bit more there. Why the bullishness around those two?
I mean, I just think that those teams are they've just executed, right? Like they've done great. Like the artwork is great, and the teams have executed. And I think at this point, and I'm sure you know this yourself, where you have a lot of people that have a lot of faith and trust in you and your ability to execute. And I think that these are just native Web3 teams that have knocked the ball out of the park, that I'm really excited to see what they do over the next, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I love that answer, G. I'll also answer similarly. I think the two buckets that I just love and constantly love are the generative art Grail bucket. So Chromie Squiggles for me, obviously, Kev, I'm diehard. G knows this as well.
We should be getting some of that royalty action from Eric at this point, given how much he's been pumping and stuff.
Eric deserves every penny. Like it's a beautiful project.
He's been donating almost all that, right? Like it's insane. He's such a good human.
Donating. He's the best. He really is like an exceptional human being. So I would say Chromie Squiggles, of course. So I've got my eye on that market, but like you said, it's remaining. I mean, the Diamond Hands are coming out in force. Fidenzas, I love. I love Fidenzas. I've kept an eye on potentially picking one up during this period of retracement. So on the generative art side, those two I really like. And then there's a number of projects that I don't want to pump bags before I'm able to fill them. So there's a couple of projects in the Art Blocks curated section that I've had my eye on that are pretty special and pretty exceptional. So keep an eye on some of the stuff that has come out over the last year during this period of retracement. I'll say also like Cyber Brokers, I think those have kind of dislocated from, listen, Josie is an exceptional builder. She's a very credible artist. She's a Web3 legend, and the team that she's assembled around Cyber Brokers is pretty awesome. So that's one that I think is very much like a 10-year play. To got to agree there. The sleeper that I just have always had a soft spot for, even given like all of the volatility around the project, is Meebits. I know that it's a curveball, but at the price point it's currently at, and like where I think this thing could exist in the future, I think it's got some legs and a pretty special tailwind that could possibly happen for it over the next 6 to 12 months. G, have you looked at that one?
Somebody on my team was talking to me about Meebits, like literally yesterday. I mean, I have a bunch of Meebits. I'm not planning on selling them anytime soon. I was just, disappointed when, nothing really came of it, but I also know we're really early days right now. And I do think like they're quirky and they're fun. I think once we start being in more immersive 3D environments, I think that people are going to be bringing them out to play much more.
What do you think, Kev?
I believe they are the least expensive of all the Yuga properties, sans land, if you take land out of the equation.
Correct.
If you do want to own a piece of Yuga, the Meebits, and of course, they came from the CryptoPunks founders, so they came from Larva Labs.
Did.
So that's there's something special about that as well.
It's like they've got the lineage of Larva, but they've got the execution and future, the skills around brand building and IP and the work we've seen some of these centralized organizations do in Web3. Like they've got some of those tailwinds behind them. It's also become clear that Yuga is excited about the IP. They're excited about building a universe around the Meebits. They're starting to drop teasers. They've already initiated somewhat of a rebrand. They're posting more frequently. So if I had to like pick a dislocated asset within the Yuga universe, given that these things they've got quite a few of them at this stage, it would have to be Meebits. They've got it's a collection that I think hasn't seen its brightest moments yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hold a bunch, and I'm just sitting on them. I've never touched them because I think that long term they'll appreciate more. I'm curious. Have we seen anything from Yuga in terms of their plans for CryptoPunks or Meebits? Have they announced anything?
I think. Go ahead, G.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything. I think some things might be coming soon, but nothing that I've heard concrete personally.
What would you want, G? Curious for you and Kev. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. what would you want Yuga to do with punks? Like if you could wave a magic wand, like I guess what kind of control would you like to see them exert over that collection, or lack of control?
I mean, I think like one of the beautiful things about punks is that like they never, it's funny because I was really frustrated with them at this point last year, because I was like, oh, why aren't they doing more? And then I had a couple conversations, one particularly with Snowfro, where he kind of like, really gave me his thesis and his view on it. And I was like, okay, I get it. It's their baby. They can choose what they want to do with it, right? Like I bought it full well and knowing like what the rights were when I bought it. And since then, it's really given me like a different perspective, especially when, I talked to Snow in regards to art blocks and chromie squiggles and, what he wants for it as the artist, not as like, a businessman or a commercial person. And so like, to me now, when I think about it, it's like, I'd like Yuga to do like as little as possible with it, like I want them to kind of just be stewards of, just like the fact that CryptoPunks are so legendary, right? Like every PFP project is a derivative of CryptoPunks, you know what I mean? Because every, whether there's 10,000 or, their unique individual traits, every project is kind of taking from that thesis that worked so well for them and is like kind of a tribute to it, right? So it's like, treat these like what they are, which is a piece of art, and they don't necessarily need to be commercialized.
Oh, gee, you and I have different opinions on this stuff, man. Let's go.
Okay,
Let's
cool.
go. All right. So here's my take. Like, so 100% agree. I mean, no one on this call is going to, punks are the OG, right? Like that's the reason why we all collect them. We all love them. They're so iconic on so many different fronts. That said, you're Yuga. You have a lot of resources, right? Like, are you just going to sit there and let it like sit off on the shelf as like a historic project? You could. And I think there are ways that you can screw it up. But that said, I like their playbook. They have the Yuga playbook, which is a good one, right? So I feel as though.
Well, what do you think their playbook is?
So if I'm Yuga, punk rockers, I used to go to a lot of punk rock shows. My first concert was NoFX, and I used to the big into punk rock back in the day. It's the degen crowd. It's like the ultimate degen. Like, we would get fucked up and go into mosh pits and do all kinds of crazy shit, right? And so if that's the case, like there should be a bottle of moonshine dropped to every single CryptoPunk holder. And they should, you drink moonshine, you drink the wrong stuff, you can die from it. Lots of bad stuff can happen, right? So, if you're a punk and you drink some moonshine, like that's the next derivative project of punks right there. And that comes out in a higher fidelity. They're fun. They're an expansion. It's less precious. You can play a lot more with that than the derivatives than you can with the original OG art. And then I think you go out and you buy Punk's comics, to be honest, and you double down on that. You hire amazing writers and you turn the Punk's comic into something that is just like a franchise that is like just a really dark, amazing a piece of literature that is where we see all this happening. You go to a comic book store these days, and it's more about those like longer form reads that you get on the comic side. And I think you could just double down on that comic book culture combined with the punk rockness of it all. And I don't know, there's something to be said there that doesn't say Saturday morning cartoon CryptoPunks, that doesn't say mass movie, CryptoPunks. Like, there's a way to play this that is still true to that kind of like hardcore punk rock nature of it, that gets some expansion and some lifeblood back into it, where there's parties, there's, different types of rewards for various attributes. Like, there could be a lot of fun to be had there that isn't necessarily a sellout, because you don't want to sell out that brand. Does that make sense, or am I just crazy for dreaming all this shit up?
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely does make sense. These are all things that I think we probably all had conversations of. I'd love to know what Derek thinks.
I'm so torn on this one. I really am. I'm like split down the middle, because I part of me feels like I treat punks very much like an art piece. Like it very much like was a response to like generative art. It was a response to like what it meant to actually put work on the blockchain for the first time. Or become like at least the first culturally significant project to do so, and actually ossify a community around it. it stands apart from everything else that falls after it. To your point, G, it was like the very start of the lineage. And as historians go back in time, they'll really point back to that project, which, as we know, collecting some of this stuff is just a very powerful marker for collectability. The other part of me is like, I'm listening to Kevin chat about products and I'm just geeking out because like there's so much you can do around like the legacy of what punks have been and where they could go in the future. That I think the trick will have to be threading a needle in a way that doesn't divide this early community of people who responded to the work in a way that was much more, I don't know if pure is the right word, but much more artistic, like creatively. I think they bias towards these things being less of like an identity marker and more like an art piece that just happened to have 10,000 of them. With this idea of like, what does it actually mean to bring persistent value to that community over time in ways that are actually interesting, in ways that we know can capture attention, in ways that we know are valuable. So I'm very much a divided house on this between you two.
It's funny because I think I was leaning more towards Kevin's viewpoint. And then I had a really long conversation with Snowfro about this in like December. It was at Metaversa last year. And, he kind of like he was like, this is their baby and this is what they wanted to do with it. And that's fine. Right. And like, that's what, you don't go back and try to get the artist to retroactively change their rights because that was never their view. Right. Like when you go launch Bored Apes, I think that was in response, right, to the fact that CryptoPunks didn't have their IP and, there was a lot of conversation around that. And, they knew what they were creating when, the reason why they gave people their IP is because they wanted people to go out and do exactly what ended up happening. Right. So I don't know. When I hear you talk, Kevin, I'm like, yeah, like that sounds really cool. But I also think that there's like a really fine line because you can very easily fuck that up.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, 100%.
Commercialize too much.
True.
Right.
It's true.
So
yeah, I mean, if you go in,
it's going to be interesting.
If you're going into a Target and you're seeing CryptoPunk stuff on, in the toy aisle and stuff like that, it's like, oh man, this was so cool. This was like this like cool little art thing, and like that would feel wrong to me. It would have to be really tightly held and more on the underground side, right? Like true to like what punk rockers like subscribe to. So I don't know. It is a tough one. Speaking of punks though, real quick, you guys probably shut me down real quick on this one. 17,000 ETH in trading volume, floor of 4.4, CryptoPunks V1 wrapped.
Oh man. So, do we want to talk about V1s? Let's go there.
I mean, let's just go there for 2 minutes. A lot of people don't know what V1s are.
I'll give a quick overview. I think hopefully I won't do a terrible job, but the overview is this. Originally, when the Larva Labs guys deployed the contract for CryptoPunks, there was a mistake. There was a bug a claiming bug, I believe it was, that ran afoul of like the intent of the artist. What they ended up doing immediately after is catching the bug and deploying a second version, which they called the authentic version. It's the CryptoPunks that we all know and love today. It's the stuff that's been collected since, and the community has ossified around. What ended up happening is some people discovered that there was this original contract that was deployed, and they named it CryptoPunks V1, and they referred to the CryptoPunks that actually has the community and the brand and the significance and the culture and the thing that actually got people interested in the project, got people interested in, the work itself as a formatting revolution to take art and put it on these blockchains. It's a completely different project in many people's views. This collectible that exists, that was kind of a mistake made by Larva Labs, and the actual project that has withstood time and built an audience, so on and so forth. I think what ended up happening was there was a few folks that had a large stockpile of these V1s, which is what the original project is called, is referred to, that have started trying to bring it back. And not as like a total competitor to the project that we all know and love today as CryptoPunks, but more as like this, weird little collectible or piece of history that happens to exist on the blockchain, being this like failed experiment around CryptoPunks before the contract that we all know and have adopted was launched. So that's the context. We have two collections that we're discussing here. The actual CryptoPunks project, which has been acknowledged by virtually everyone, including the artist, as being the actual collection, and a contract that was that had a bug and was a mistake and has been kind of pushed to the side as kind of a failed contract that people have dug up since and have started to revive around the, like a niche collectible around like CryptoPunks era history. But G, maybe you can fill in some of those holes.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really, really good job of explaining it. I personally, when I hear Larva Labs say, this is the official version, right? Like the CryptoPunks that we know, that to me is like all I need to hear, right? Of like, that is it, right? Because it's like, that's like the artist, confirming that they made the art, right? It's like, this is the official version. That could have been, a copy that they were doing, while they were achieving what they wanted to be, is that perfection that they wanted to put out there, right? Like I had a really interesting conversation with Daniel Arsham a few months ago where, he was like, artists, a lot of times when artists come into the space, they rush to make an NFT and put something on chain. When he's like, when I look at the beginning of my career, there's work out that I did when I was younger that I wouldn't put out there in public, right? And so it's like, if that was on chain, that would be on chain forever. And I think that this was, there was a bug in the contract, and Larva Labs, right? They righted it, right? And that's when, the CryptoPunks that we know came out. And for me, like, it's just, they told me that this is the project, like, this is what I want, right? Like, I haven't even really thought about, any derivatives in that sense.
Yeah. The only thing that I think about here is that, well, a couple things. One, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that original contract, none of that was on chain, right? So they were pointing to an API that was fed via Larva Labs to show the imagery. Larva Labs took that down because that's not the official collection. So in essence, there's no artwork associated with the V1s, right? But people did a one-to-one mapping. They wrapped it in a new contract that is not official.
That sounds right to me.
Yeah,
that sounds right to me.
So they wrapped it in a new contract that's not official from Larva Labs. That points to artwork. Otherwise, the artwork would never even show up. So it's not like you discovered something like, oh, here's a lost piece of art. No, that's gone. Like someone rewrapped it and pointed it to the V2 artwork, or not the V2, but the official artwork. And that's why it has graphics that represent them today, right? That's my understanding.
It's almost as if, and you guys can tell me if this comp even makes sense or not, but it's almost as if, we had an artist create a piece of work in like draft form, and eventually it would be this magnificent painting. But what they did was they sketched it out first before they started the original artwork, and they left the sketch pad. They maybe left it in their house or they threw it away, and somebody found the sketch pad. And after seeing the magnificent painting that was created, went back and painted it perfectly, stroke by stroke, so that it could look very similarly to the painting that we all know and love, and make the argument that this is actually the authentic painting that the artist created.
It's
Does
almost
that
like
comp sound right to you guys?
It kind of. I would say it's almost like they had a framed piece of artwork. Larva said, "Oh crap, we made a mistake." They took the artwork out of the frame. Somebody found the old frames. Right, the artwork was missing. There was no artwork. There was no even sketch pad. Right.
I like your analogy better.
But you see what I'm saying, right? Because that's essentially what it was. It was a contract that said there used to be something here. The artwork was missing, and somebody said, "Well, hey, let's use the original frame and put in a piece of artwork."
No, it's true. That's true. And I guess like I think of the fact that these things went onto the blockchain as like part of the art. It's like the whole form and medium of like these things are so interrelated that it's difficult to say like which part of the art, where are we drawing the line in terms of the art? Is it the image or is it the contract? But I think where I net out on this is it's like this cool, weird piece of like Larva Labs history.
Right.
This is not the art. Like this is not what the artist's intent is, which to me is the most important thing always. 10 out of 10. It's like, these things are interesting and special because like we all gravitated to like the art and the artist's intent and like what they wanted the work to stand for. Right. That's why this community formed. It was not their intent to have this like collectible hangout in the universe, but it exists. And so if a market wants to get created around this like weird collectible thing that is kind of janky and has really like the holes have been filled in by the community, They can. Like, people are free to spend their money on whatever they want. It's not something that I'm particularly excited about, nor do I pay much attention to.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we had this. I've never talked about this on the podcast, so it is interesting. It's just an interesting little anecdote about the previous history of this whole thing, you know? And with my collector hat on, I don't own any, I don't want any, but I am like, I remember those old days where you get that comic book or that baseball card that had the misprint, right? And you're always like, ooh, I got the misprint one, like the rogue one, you know? And it's not the same here, but I see what the argument people are trying to make with that. Like they got the one that was messed up, right? So I don't know. I can see why people are drawn to it.
It's also no coincidence that the person that's been pushing this narrative the most, I think, like, was the biggest holder that I think was dumping pretty aggressively into the initial up moves, right?
Oh, so, that's interesting. I didn't know that whole backstory there.
I didn't know that either.
I don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. You know, I just know that, like, one of, if not the largest holder, is basically the person that's been, like, really driving the narrative.
Yeah. That I've heard. Very interesting conversation. I'm glad we could do this on the pod. This is awesome.
Yeah, I should probably pick my I forgot to pick my favorites too. If we all get 100 ETH to spend on something.
I wanted to.
I'll go quick. So I mean, obviously I can't. I'm going to leave my own projects out of the mix because I know the roadmap. I'm super bullish on that stuff. But aside from that, I would say, you know, I haven't picked up a Cryptodes with Nouns glasses, and I've always wanted one of those just because I think they're iconic and they trade higher than the floor Cryptode is, as you can imagine. So that to me would always be just like a fun little pickup. You know, crummy squiggles, I don't even need to say it, of course. You know, I can never have enough squiggles. I don't know where I would go from there. I might sit back and wait a bit. I'm in this, I would love more punks, but at the same time, I still feel like punks are pricey, and I'd rather go and spread my ETH out across more projects than just pick up a couple more punks. I don't know what else I would double down on at this point. I hear you on the Meebit side. I'm just scrolling through like the top 100 projects right now based on trading volume. Fidenzas are still pricey, man. That's 74 ETH for a floor.
That's the big problem. It's
like a big chunk of your allocation we talked about.
It might be too big. It might be too big of a chunk.
Goblin Town?
So why don't we talk about Goblin Town? Because I think there's actually two pieces here that are fairly interesting. It's called Goblin Town. Goblin Town WTF.
Yeah.
So the two things that I think are interesting around this project is the free to mint mechanic. Like, it was a totally free mint. And then the founders ended up doxing themselves just yesterday.
Oh, who was it? I didn't see.
It was, do you know G?
I think man, is it called Truth?
Oh, it is the Truth Group.
Truth.
That's right. Truth.com, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm curious, like, let's kick the tires on this free mint thing. I'm curious to hear if you guys have strong opinions, strong feelings on it. I know, G, you and I have been talking about this for a couple of months, maybe even longer. But maybe we can just kick the tires on this thing. What do we think? Do we like it? Do we not like it? Does it work? What is it really good at? What is it maybe not so good at? But yeah, curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this.
Yeah, Kev, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and G, I'd love to get your take on this too, because, you know, if you're willing to go into it a bit, I feel very, 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 very lucky in that when we did the Moonbirds thing, we went out and it was essentially a round of financing, you know, to give us to go and build utility. And we told people that, and they were very, very supportive, and they paid the 2.5 ETH, and it gave us a big war chest to go out and just build and go heads down for the next few years. If you are an art-based project, and I will say this, all the future stuff that we're going to do is going to be basically right around the lines of free to mint. We have some fun ideas around different mechanics we want to use, but we're gonna try and get a more diverse set of hands, especially people that can't afford 2.5 ETH. It's not lost on us that a lot of people just couldn't afford that. So as we do later projects, you'll see us embrace that model more. But I feel for, I know it's not just a lot of these projects are not just about the initial art. It's about I have to go hire a team and build out a team around this, right? And if you're going to hire a team and build out a team and keep delivering over the next decade, you got to have some pretty substantial secondary sales and turnover. And sometimes that's at odds at what you want to do in terms of building a long-term community, right? Because you want, with Moonbirds, less than 1% of our overall birds are available for sale, or right around 1%, something like that. And that was by design. And that was because with the primary sale, we could afford to not have that turnover, right? And we're not reliant upon that to make payroll as we continue to build out a utility, PFP. And so, G, you kind of went the other direction, which was, awesome, but it's a bit harder now that you have to have a lot of secondary sales to fuel a lot of the stuff you want to do. Is that more or less correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's super interesting because we probably went like the exact opposite route. And Derek, I'd love to, I think you talk to both of us really closely, so I'm pretty sure that you can give both points of view here. But the thing that I found interesting was, I see the things that, I'm working on and that I want to do. And I know that the things down the road, I don't necessarily aren't going to be free to mint, right? It won't be airdrops because I just don't think that that's sustainable, right? Long term is just, I've seen a couple ecosystems where they're like, all right, if you own this and you stake that and you get the airdrop, and then it just starts to become very complicated. And I know for my vision of my end state of my ecosystem that I'm building, I want it to be very simple, right? Where, you read about it, you can read the instructions and you understand how everything works in 30 seconds or less, just that truth, that beauty and simplicity. And so knowing that and knowing the projects that I have coming down the road, I really wanted to find a way to really reward my earliest supporters. And, I've gotten plenty of messages throughout the last 3 weeks of people that said, I helped them get out of debt. I changed their life. They were going through a hard time where, even if I had priced it at 1 ETH or, half an ETH or 2 ETH or whatever I would have priced it at, they would have been priced out regardless because they didn't even have that liquidity to buy it. And so, the people that might be interested in the things down the road will probably have liquidity to buy and pay a higher price. And so that they won't be as price sensitive on the other projects. But for me, it's I felt like it was a good way to build that community. And I'm not trying to get the turnover there either, just knowing that I'm working on other projects down the road where I do foresee that revenue stream coming.
I love that. I think you did. That's a fantastic thing that you did there too. To take care of your community, put them
G
first.
Crushed it.
Yeah, that's huge.
Thank you. And I mean, I will say it's a large part. Thank you to the conversations I've had with both of you. And Derek, you've always been so generous with your time. And we've spent so many hours going back and forth and me, kind of spitballing ideas and being I don't know if it's going to work. And what do you think? And you've always been really supportive and giving me great advice. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, you guys are the man. Two of my favorite product builders in this space, unquestionably. I love that there's different ways to build community, and both of them can lead to very incredible second order effects. You both have proven that when you have a strong founder or a strong team and a very strong vision, a strong project, there are different ways to wield different tools in the toolkit to build community. I would say it's clear to me just looking at the communities that you both have built. Kev, you started a little bit earlier. I think, Proof, remind me if this is right, but started December of last year.
Yeah, that's right.
Both of them are just ravenous for you guys, ravenous for the content, ravenous for the stuff you're building, the products that you're building. And so having taken different approaches at different times and seeing the end state of these things get big has been just very fun for me to watch. On the free to mint thing, it's a fascinating area of exploration. I think the thing that's always that's attracted to me to that model, just thinking through it and having these ongoing conversations, has been that it detaches this idea of economics from collecting and collectibles and building a community. It's almost as if when you reward, so G gave, these 1,000 passes, effectively to 1,000 people that have interacted with him on the internet or interacted with him in real life through POAPs. When you reward your community in that way through a free to mint project, you basically make it so they don't have to worry about the floor price. They don't have to worry about whether they're in the green. They don't have to worry about whether or not someone's undercutting, the listing prices. It's almost as if like they're relieved from their duty of like financial responsibility, and they can purely enjoy the community that's been built, which I think it's going to create like a very interesting effect for G and his community. G had this thing just a few hours ago, where it was basically just a market talk. And like, I jumped in there and there was, I don't know, G, you probably know the full number, but maybe like 15% of your entire community in the middle of the day had gotten together in Discord and were just like shooting ideas around and talking, which is like, for something that you tweeted out was happening 30 minutes before, it's pretty like wild to see that. And that's just one data point of like the stuff that I'm seeing your community start to engage in. It's almost as if like, there's something really special when you optimize for that type of behavior. And I think you're just at the earliest stages of what that's going to look like, and excited to see the future drops that you do and the products that you're going to be rolling out and all the cool stuff you're cooking up behind the scenes. And then for Kevin, it's like unquestionable that you've built this amazing brands, this amazing community with multiple lines of effort that are just like running at full steam, and you're resourced effectively to continue to put put your foot on the gas. And so you started this 6 months ago and it's just exploded. And so I guess what I'm saying is like, if I had to pick the more important through line rather than the drop mechanic, is that you both are very strong founders. You both are very strong builders, and there's different ways to build community that can lead to different effects over time. So excited to see both of your journeys play out.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is all like, it would be silly for any one of us to say we have the playbook. Like there's no playbook.
Totally.
We're figuring this shit out in real time.
It's
right?
true. It's true.
I've had so much anxiety over the last like 30 days being like, oh my God, like, because like we're effectively building the plane while we're flying. Right. And so like, sometimes like, well, I don't know. Like I'll figure out that solution when I get to it. Right. Like hopefully like we have an answer by then, but we'll deal with that when we get there. So, but like, I know I want to like provide for the community, and I know that people, have faith in me. Like one of the most humbling, the most humbling stats I've gotten is that like, I think, this thing was free to mint. It's, there's some people in the Discord that this, it's a significant sum, a significant portion of their portfolio. And there's still only been like 15% turnover of like the people that minted, only 15% have like sold, right? So it's like, there's still like this high retention base, which I honestly didn't expect. Cause sometimes when I get a free airdrop, I'm like, oh, free money. All right, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
See ya. Right. And that hasn't been the case, which has been like very humbling for me.
Well, that's just a testament to how much people believe in what you're building for the future. I mean, that's just all it comes down to. People are behind you, which is great. I think one of the reasons that that I was so excited to chat with you, G, when we first started talking about this months ago, that you were going to build one, and the reason why I'll take a call with any founder that wants to build, their own little private thing, is because I know that there will be learnings that you find, 6 months from now that will be applicable to me, and vice versa, right? So it needs to be a world of like sharing and just talking about what's working, what's not, and collectively coming to, it's such a small world. Like there's no reason why we all can't be as transparent as possible and build awesome communities together.
Yeah, no. And also it's like, it's one of those things where I know people compare, admit one to proof a lot. It's like, oh, it's like another proof. And I'm like, yeah, like it's a membership, it's like, you're going to be part of this community, but it's going to be like my view. Right. And it's like, it's, going to be very different than yours. And it's going to be very different than, the next person that's going to start their own version. Right. So it's like, just because they're similar doesn't mean they're competing.
Oh, I mean,
right?
the three of us were on the Flamingo call this morning. And the reason we were on that call is because we're all part of that organization, and we were all learning different stuff that we wouldn't learn in our own Discords, right? So it's like, that's just the way it is. There's always like secret little alpha to be found and learnings to be found everywhere,
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Awesome. So we don't want to talk about goblins? Because I know that came up for a hot second. Do either you hold any?
I don't hold any.
I don't hold any either.
I don't either.
I'm really surprised at like where the floor is and how it's gone so parabolic. I think the interesting thing is that the founders docs and the floor price went down, right? So I thought that was interesting.
Well, a lot of people thought it was, what's his name?
People thought it was Yuga, right?
Some people thought it was that, but the other, the creator of, gosh, I'm drawing a blank. The creator of Beavis and Butthead. They thought that was the rumor going around for a bit.
That Mike Judge?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I think what's interesting about that effect, about the floor price going down, it's almost as so I have two views. The first is like this team has done an amazing job. Like from the outside looking in, I have no exposure to this project and have only been following it like you guys have, just passively and hearing people talk about it and jumping into some of the spaces to hear what's going on. They've done an amazing job building a community around this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unquestionable that like if they are resourced correctly, they're a strong team, they can articulate a future of what this thing looks like, you can build and grow from the community that exists today into something pretty special. Like we've seen a number of projects do that. So I think the question is like, what does that look like for them? And are they up for the challenge?
There was two brilliant moves that they did. Two things that I'm really drawn to. One, the grunting shit in Twitter Spaces was just amazing marketing. I'm sorry, that was just brilliant. I heard that and I was like, why didn't we do owl noises on Spaces for a while?
Totally.
And the second thing is that they don't have a Discord. Like we have enough Discords like that. That's brilliant. They brought it to Twitter, and it's
very cool.
it's not another thing to join, and that was by design. And I thought that was pretty smart.
So it's funny you say that because I really, really held off a very long time to start a Discord. And when I started, like it's token gated, right? There's only one channel. It's only for the 1,000 members because to your point is like every time people are like, oh, like join the Discord. I'm like, I don't want to join the Discord. Like I'm not going to be in your Discord. So why do you want me to be in there? So I do think that that's a really, really good strategy. We're probably going to start seeing more people do that, right? Because a lot of these Discords are like, madhouses, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, especially I'm sure you have plenty of experience of this where, sometimes you're fielding questions when it's like, well, this is taking away from the time that I need to build. And, you want me to handle you with the customer care, the community care, but that takes away from the time that I can actually put out the product that you want.
I've got 3 full-time Discord moderators on payroll, along with somebody that has joined us from Zendesk, just so we can specifically build up the rails to get answers to questions that are ticketed in a really special way. Like we really want to give above and beyond customer support. Do I wish I didn't have to build all of that? Yeah, but that's kind of part of what we signed up for on the community side, so It is what it is.
Yeah.
I do enjoy connecting with people in chat form though. I think that in token gated private chat form, there's something special about we're all in this one community together. And I think that, when you have those little smaller intimate groups as you do, G, with your 1,000 members, and I do with the Proof Collective, you're in this with them over many years to come, and you're going to make new friends that way. You'll meet each other in real life. The number of people I've done in real life, we had actually a name badges, as lame as that sounds, at one of our events. And I was like, oh shit, I don't know you by that name, Ryan, that you wrote on there, but I know you by the name underneath, that was your Discord handle. Right. And that's pretty awesome to draw those connections,
Yeah, that's amazing. How's the, I guess, the chat, I assume Moonburst has its own chat and Proof has its own, right? How is what have you noticed is the different dynamic between those two?
Yeah, I mean, the Moonbirds are obviously a lot bigger group, and there's a lot of overlap because in the spirit of kind of what you did with the Freedom Mint, we always, give, free things that we launched to the previous people that have helped us. In this case, it was the Proof Collective. So they got a couple Moonbirds for being, members of the collective. So there was a lot of overlap there. I would say that the Moonbirds are doing something really crazy where they're creating clicks around attribute types. So, and they're really going in on these things. So there's the Dead Bird Society, which we didn't even create, which is all the skeleton-based Moonbirds. They have their own private meetup in New York, which is crazy, that we didn't create. We're helping it, and that we're helping fund it and make sure that they have some funding to pull it off and swag and stuff like that. But we're seeing all these different little subgroups form. They're the nude birds now. They're all the naked birds that don't have any attributes. We've got. I got added to a Hoodie Moonbird channel on Twitter.
Yeah, and there's a ton of people in there just talking all the time.
Yeah, so they're gathering.
It's wild,
and we're doubling down on that too. So by the way, I should tell people if you go to events.proof.xyz, by the time this podcast comes out, that'll be up. It'll show you all the community run proof events that are coming up for Moonbirds and the Proof Collective, and also our official sanctioned ones. So G, just give you an example. We're doing an event, and I'm bummed you can't be in New York for NFT NYC, because I'd love to have you at some of this stuff. But we're doing an event for just the wizard and witch hat Moonbirds. So if you have one of those attributes, you go to a private magic show with David Blaine, where he's performing street magic right in front of you, just for that smaller subset of people.
You know, one of your wizard hats is in Admit One. They bought in last week.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they were actually talking about the magic show and how psyched they were for it.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I mean, it's just a fun way. That's why I'm excited for your PFP that you're gonna drop. G, when's that happening?
No plans for PFP anytime soon. That
you heard it here first, folks. PFP coming soon from G.
You gotta have it. I mean, it's the one thing that I will say. This is like just it's kind of fun, friendly talk. We realized at the Proof Collective that no one wants to use a proof like credit card as their profile photo, right? So like, how can, and I'm assuming the same is true for Mint One Pass. Like so I think you would do if you did a PFP, it would be very well received.
I've thought about it. To me, it's like, when I think about like communities, right? Like I don't necessarily want somebody to have to change their identity to say that they're part of my community, which is why I decided to not do a PFP out of the gate, and which is why I liked, kind of like the ticket thing, right? Because it's like, you're a member to this. It's not your entire identity of who you are as a person, but it's like one facet of your life that hopefully it's a community that become a part of, right? Like, so it's like, everybody likes different sports teams and everybody has their different hobbies, but that doesn't always necessarily define who they are as a person, which is why I've been like very shy to necessarily stay away from doing that, at the very least at the outset. And I'm going to see how that evolves over time. I think, and Derek can probably attest to this, is like with regards to that community building and that signaling, I feel like I understand signaling pretty well. And I think that the things that I have planned, I think will be good and fun things that, although won't be a PFP, will be great community builders.
You and I are definitely aligned on that front, in that, we do have, obviously with Moonbirds, we do have a big PFP, but that said, when you come to the Moonbirds event, you won't be there, but when others come to the Moonbirds event, they will see artist installations around the event from artists, all different types of artists, and that we're not affiliated with, because, I want to celebrate. I want Proof to be about the celebration of all artists and all projects that are out there. And two, I think PFPs are kind of like how you feel when you're getting up in the morning. Like, sometimes you want to wear a baseball cap. Sometimes, you want to put on a button-down shirt or whatever it may be, or a t-shirt. Like, you change it out depending on your day or your week or your month. And that's totally fine. So that's kind of the same kind of ethos that I want us all to embrace, is like the celebration of all projects, Sweet. Well, I don't have any other projects that I have that are worth mentioning that I would invest in. Although I will say Ringers, in terms of Art Blocks projects, are trading at 44 ETH. That's another interesting one where I could see myself getting in. I love all things Dimitri, so I could see myself dipping in there with some of that imaginary ETH that I have to buy things with.
Dimitri is awesome. It is one of like the Grail collections of Art Blocks, and it'll be I think it's on the short list for a few folks that I've spoken with already. Yeah.
Awesome. What else? Anything else to cover, or should we wrap things up?
I think we did a good job. Like, should we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, sounds great. G, just so people know, I'm going to pick up one of your passes because I love bouncing around different communities. I'll do that right now, and apologize for not being more involved on day one. It's been kind of chaotic over the last month or so.
I totally get it.
Where can people go and learn more about your community?
So you on my Twitter on GMoneyNFT, there's also the link to my community called Admit 0001. There's 3 zeros in the one. And then also you can go to g.money, and there you can get all the information that you want. And yeah, I mean, the community's been great. I'm super excited, been working long and hard on this, as you guys can attest to, is the conversations that we've been having for, months at this point. And I'm excited for, what's to come. And I think a lot of the conversations that we've had over the last, 48, 72 hours have been like, what does this mean for NFTs? Like, at the end of the day, like, the tech is still there. The tech is still revolutionary. And, the future is definitely going to be built on it. So, now is the time to build, as even though there might be some uncertainty right now in the short term, long term is, I think this is, it's like being in the internet, back in, the 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. And you see like how important that is part of our life right now. I think it's the same magnitude.
Yeah. I was just on a panel at a CoinDesk Consensus in Austin, Texas over the weekend with Aaron and Pri from Flamingo DAO. It was a panel with the three of us talking about Flamingo DAO's earliest days. And I made the same point, which is like, this technology is too good. Like, this is not going back in the bottle here, folks. This is like, a formatting revolution that upgrades all of the world's assets. As more value flows move onto these trust minimized ledgers, as more assets move into these trust minimized ledgers, the types of products that will get commercialized and built are going to touch all consumers, not just the 2 million that are interacting with OpenSea today. It's going to move to 50 million, 500 million, 100 million. I mean, in time that I think is going to catch people by surprise. So it's only speeding up. It's not slowing down. Couldn't agree more with you, G.
Yeah, you all should, if you get a chance and you're curious, I had Ian Rogers on the show from Ledger recently, and we talked about the pain points and, all the press cycles that are dedicated to this person lost X million of dollars, or this Bored Ape, or this Moonbird, or whatever it may be, because of this hack, because of the seed phrase, because of this or that. They're working on they're speaking of just heads down and building right now. Ledger has some cool shit coming, and he kind of hinted at some of that around the idea of never having to have a seed phrase written down in the first place. And what does that world look like? What does it mean for Ledger itself to inspect a smart contract in real time and throw warnings, right? Like there's really fun stuff that's going to be built that I think will cut down on a lot of these bad press cycles. It's like, no one writes about the good things that are happening. They love the train wrecks. And so I'm excited for the next couple of years. And I wholeheartedly agree. Like, you can't put this tech back in the bottle. It's here to stay. So excited for that. One last question for you both. Had a buddy come to me and say, Kevin, I'm selling my Moonbird, but not for the reasons why you may think. I want this different attribute, and I'm down a little bit. I'm going to sell it, take a tax loss, buy another Moonbird that has an attribute that I like even better. Are you all doing any kind of tax loss, like harvesting right now, like taking losses on anything and then side trading for different attributes?
So I'm looking at that. I wouldn't say like my entire tax planning strategies are in full effect in June of the middle of the year, but I am like taking a deep look at like, what does it mean to get the attributes that I really want in certain collections? What does it mean to go after certain things? And should I unload here knowing that my basis, I'd want to lower my basis on a new collection and maybe do some harvesting on this side. So I am always looking at that. I would say G's answer is going to be a little different because he's on cheat mode right now. But I'll let G explain.
No, not on cheat mode, on arbitrage mode.
Mode.
I live in a jurisdiction where there's no capital gains. I live in PR, so I don't necessarily need to worry about tax loss harvesting, which is a positive.
No, man, I'm so jealous.
I am too.
You guys can both come join. I've been trying to pitch Eric to move down here.
True. It's getting more and more tempting by the day.
Gee, I'm gonna come out there and visit you, man. I got to bring my wife, and I need her to have a like good food experience. It could be street food, it could be anything, but she needs to have good food.
I'm a foodie, so I will take you. I'll give you all the best restaurants. I'll take you to the best places. Trust me. Like, there's also like a great crypto community that's being born down here. A lot of builders, a lot of really smart DeFi people, especially. There's just like a lot of great talent here, and I know Derek can probably speak to that as well, as we know a lot of the same people down here. It's
blowing up. It's blowing up in a really big way. It's awesome to watch.
That's awesome. Well, I'm gonna be in LA with Derek. That's my next home, but maybe down the road.
Let's go. You're coming out, G.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to spend more time in LA, so I'll definitely be out there visiting.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, guys. Let's do this again soon.
Awesome.
Chat
Thanks so
soon,
much.
guys.
All right, talk soon. All right, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you would like to help us out, head on over to proof.xyz and click on the reviews button at the very top and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks so much. Take care.